Sure.
I think it's working.
It is working, okay. Sure. Well, Cell Therapy Catapult has been going for about 2 years, and for those that attended in 2012, I'd literally been appointed a few days before Terrapin and was bundled onto the stage to talk about the Catapult straight after the Minister for Science, David Willits. So in 2 years from me standing there with a mobile phone, it's come an awful long way. Cell Therapy Catapult's a part of a major initiative by the Technology Strategy Board, which is the UK's innovation agency, to really bridge the gap between invention and full commercialization. And it's not just in cell therapy. Cell therapy was one of the areas that was chosen for what amounts to about a £500 million program in investment, and that goes across cell therapy, offshore renewables, digital economy. I won't go into all the satellite applications, that's a fab one. So this innovation network has really got going very quickly. So when we set off, I simply asked the questions, rather naively, what's getting in the way from this promising science actually getting some traction and getting products to market. And it was just undertook a systematic analysis to show where the problems were in business, health economics, reimbursement, manufacturing and supply chain, and the kind of complexity of the clinical and regulatory scene, all of which the players in the space were finding difficult to navigate. They could get the science right, maybe get a little bit of first-in-man going, but people were stumbling their way forward, frankly. So we set up the Catapult from scratch to help firms address those needs, to create firms that could be vehicles to exploit technologies. And we're very pleased that we went straight into Guy's Tower. It's a terrific hospital environment there. Built laboratories, and for those of you that saw them yesterday, they're absolutely fantastic. They're designed for collaboration. And we decided to invest in those areas I've just mentioned, the business side, market access. Market access is really important. So we build a team around that where we've got health economists, reimbursement specialists, to complement the kind of science skills that we've put together, and the clinical and regulatory. We have a practice in clinical and regulatory, actually become a clinical trial sponsor.
But you have really built a great team, haven't you?
Yeah, there's about some...
And that team is very approachable. But anybody in this room can go up to them and say, "Hi, Stephen, I want to talk about manufacturing, for example." And that's what you really created, is that strong team.
That's right. And I think that's one of the things that's helped us really get so much traction early, is that the people we've got are very credible. So rather than say, spend 5 years developing a track record, we've imported people with a track record, and that means that the conversations that we can have early on with companies are more powerful. And the great thing, of course, is it's not just about building an asset to accelerate the whole commercialization landscape, but it's also about finding projects. So as usual, let's set about things systematically and actually create databases of all the projects, clinical projects, reach out internationally, and put into place systems for assessing whether these projects are going to work. And you've probably seen today, we put a couple of press releases out for 2 great projects. We're working with Smith & Nephew on a wound care product with kind of spray-on cells, and that's great that they've entered that space, and great that we've been able to so quickly form a collaboration with them.
Congratulations! That's fabulous. It's so early in to get a collaboration with basically a large farm or large medical device companies. Major achievement.
Of course, we've got them ongoing with GSK as well. They've been working on the ADA Skid product, and we think GSK's got a taste for this, and I think they're going to start investing more. So So that looks really good as well. But we've also reached back into the academic sector to try to find projects which would benefit from our investment. And the investment isn't just money, it's the investment of the expertise that we've built. So again, we've announced today, we formed a joint venture company, Catapult Therapy TCR. It's an immune cell therapy against a TCR receptor against Wilms tumor antigen. And we're going to take that and we're going to invest resources up to about £10 million to take it through to phase 2. We think that area is
very
really
exciting.
Hot. It's a great project. We've worked with some great universities, some great clinicians, so UCL.
A great university.
Imperial, Emma Morris from Great Ormond Street. In fact, lymphoma research was initially funded some of this, but this project was stuck. It wasn't going anywhere. And to get behind it and move it forward, we think that not only will that help de-bottleneck the industry by tackling these challenges, but it will create significant value. And we think that the reason that there's more and more enthusiasm in the sector is simply because the data is getting better.
Absolutely.
And of course there will be hiccups, there will be bumps on the road, trials that are supposed to work won't work, but we think there's enough that is working now that it'll start to become more like a normal investment situation where you can understand the bet. For those of you from the UK, you'll sometimes watch the Grand National, the big horse race every year, one of the biggest horse races in the world. When I was a little boy, I lived just by the race course, so I always put a bet on it. That's probably the only horse race I do put a bet on. I lost everything, but I understood the bet. And I think that that's what's happening now for the industry. People are starting to understand the bet. There are risks, but there are, the path to commercialization is becoming clearer and clearer.
So the message is really that the Catapult is well and truly open, taking the first project, and congratulations on those two super projects. They are awesome. I think getting a T-cell one on board is right on spot on where you need to be at the moment. But it's a message to everyone in this room that you are now actively taking stuff in and getting on with it. I mean, that's very quick to have gone from a building site only, a year ago? Or less
The laboratories were when we took them over this time, we didn't take them over until August, I don't think, and in June they were still performing cleft palate operations. So we built this in less than a year, and that's really good. And importantly, we had some temporary labs, so we were able to do collaborations with firms like Reneuron. We helped form a company called Viderodent to do tissue-engineered tracheas. I think Steve might be in the room. And that's leveraged in grant money from the Technology Strategy Board. So that's a great little project going ahead there. We've invested up in Roslin Cells to put together an IPS haplobank. That's a fairly big project. I think we've worked with Intercytex with Paul Kemp to help him put together a gun for intradermal injections to reduce the pain on injection.
Great. So a good lineup, but still plenty of opportunity for people to come and see your team, because you've got a booth out there, I know, and you'll be delighted. But
we are not full.
We are not full. That's the message, isn't it? And we are open. Just to go back, I mean, a more sort of tricky question really is, the UK, a lot of good news coming out, and those two things this morning, superb. But where are we in terms of the global cell therapy translation and commercialization space? How do we stack up against the US or North America in general, because Canada's doing a great job, and Japan, for example?
Yeah, I think the first thing you do is recognize that the US has got most activity. I mean, something like half of all trials are going on there. ARM did a great report just recently listing all of this when all the clinical trial readouts are out. So I'd urge people to look at that, because it's a really good read. So the US is well established and probably pushing ahead more than anyone else. Japan, of course, is making a major play to leverage up IPS. But in the UK, and in the UK and the European context, I think there's no doubt that UK's a leading nation. And I think that starts from, some key foundations. One, the science is good. The science base in the UK is great, very
outstanding.
good. The second one is that the government supports it. And that might sound, don't all governments support these things? Well, some of them support them with words, but others support them with words, money, and legislation.
And we've had a whole series of that. I mean, every science minister since David Sainsbury
right.
has supported this area very strongly, I agree.
So if you look at the Technology Strategy Board, which invests about £500 million a year, as a for instance, their biggest area of investment is health and life sciences.
I didn't know
So
that.
10 years ago, most of their money was going to places like aerospace, British Aerospace, Rolls-Royce. It's the majority of it's going to that sector now, and 70% of their engagement is with SMEs. So that kind of support is really good. But also, if you look at the way that places like MRC, Medical Research Council, approach all of this, they firmly have a translation agenda, partly because they want the things to get into clinical use, and partly because government's telling them you've got to have a translation agenda. So they put in place regenerative medicine hubs, which are addressing issues that are nearer, that are of relevance in the clinic, like the stem cell niche and imaging, stuff like that. So that's really good. And then the kind of end-to-end support that's from to take projects forward is great. And a recognition that top-down from government, trying to reform the regulatory landscape to make it easier. I'm supporting Department of Health on the so-called one-stop shop for regulation, as a for instance. So those recommendations will come out at the end of the year. So the CEOs of the MHRA and the Health and Tissues Authority and the HFEA have been extremely cooperative in recognising how they can make it easier for both academic clinicians and companies to get their products through. And of course, government again has tasked the Health Research Authority to make it easier to do clinical trials in the UK. So things like a single application to get through the research committees. All of those things are going in place to try and reduce the frustration of just simply getting these trials going. So it's not just fine words, it's not just money, it's actually, they're in trying to rewire the apparatus, and rather like Pfizer and Astra have been in front of the House of Commons, of course, there are several of us in the room, including yourself, who've been in front of the House of Lords, being quizzed on what we're going to do to rewire the landscape. So I think that increasingly the UK is moving out of this kind of good science base and into the commercialization landscape. And money is being attracted. I think the US is always good for raising money for good areas, but actually, if you look in the public markets, a lot of it comes from London.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Mesoblast, third of their stock is held here in London.
Absolutely.
And the UK is very strong on integration of the research, the clinical translation, commercialization, and manufacturing. And I wanted to look at that manufacturing bit next. I mean, Keith, you've been very successful getting the Catapult really going. And the Catapult, to paraphrase, is process development is where the manufacturing sort of ends a little bit there. I guess that's fair. And now you've got an additional £55 million, $80 million to build a large-scale manufacturing facility, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's what we need to be a country which is, got all the parts to go forward. Tell us a little bit about that, the background, and what your vision for that large-scale manufacturing facility is going to be.
So when I first started and did the systematic analysis of what the landscape looked like in the UK, academics told me we didn't need any more manufacturing facilities because, quote, we've got lots of clean rooms. Well, I thought, fine, that's fine and dandy, and so I set up the Catapult in a way that would develop processes so that they were really good, they were as good as they could be, you get the cost of goods down, get the reproducibility and reliability, and then put them into these facilities. But what became apparent to us when we did more systematic analysis was these units were all small. They're very good people, no doubt about it. And some of the facilities are absolutely top class, but most of them are small. They're mostly academic. So the idea that they're going to go all the way through to a market authorization is by and large pretty naive. We also looked at the pipeline of products in the UK and potential inward investment to access the European, and we just put together a kind of Monte Carlo simulation of what the needs would be based on space from an MSC model. And frankly, if this industry is going to be successful, that capacity in the UK is bust in 2017. And I'll bet you, if you do the analysis in other countries, it'll be exactly the same.
I mean, you've, I think, got on record as saying one large-scale phase 3 pretty much takes out the UK's capacity.
Even if you could get it,
and you'd be spotting it around all over the country to get that volume.
So one of the House of Lords recommendations was that the UK should build a large facility. So I went out to say, well, we'll talk to contract manufacturers who are either in the space or could be in the space, and try to encourage them in. And I think it's still too early for them to take that really big risk. So they're kind of still in the incremental game, because they're not going to commit, $40-50 million worth of capital against an uncertain demand. I know Lonza are really busy at the moment.
Yeah, doing a great job.
And that's great.
Absolutely.
And I think that's healthy for the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the CMOs are really working flat out, but they are flat out.
So what we did was we simply went along, made the case to government, and had to go through all of the usual stuff to get this over the line, and we're very fortunate to get this into the budget. So that £55 million that we've got from government is three streams of money. First is capital to build the place.
That's government's happy to provide that. UK government's good on capital.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It also provided me with a lump of revenue funding to actually fund and staff up the operation.
And that's rare.
And that's very rare. And to this credit, it said they're going to put a big lump of extra money into the Technology Strategy Board so that firms can be supported in going into it. And that money comes on. So the planning money's now this year. The capital and revenue starts 15, 16, 16, 17, during which time we'll build the place. And then the competition funding starts up after that. But when you wire back from competition funding, in fact, a couple of the TSB people in the room, they're kind of thinking about designing the competitions now, how they're going to support industry. So one of the things which is absolutely key on this facility is we know that because technology is going to be advancing like mad, whatever we build, if we're not very careful, will be superseded by new technology, and therefore we're going to do it in a highly modular, reconfigurable fashion. And we know that firms place a great deal of store in the intellectual property and know-how in their processes. So we intend to put together a business model which will allow to firms to use this like a manufacturing hotel if they want to. And of course that means that an allo process can go in there, can be cooked up. If it's an auto process, they'll be able to book out the suites of rooms over a period of time. And importantly, to get a license, you have to be able to convince the EMA that you've got the wherewithal to supply the market. So you'll never be able to do it from a kind of 2 or 3 man place. But when the license comes through, they'll be able to do the in-market supply from there until such a time as it makes sense to go and move, build an identical operation in a place they're choosing. But we would think, because manufacturing is tough to move.
Yeah, it's very sticky, there is no doubt about it.
That will mean that the locations will be, manageable from that location.
And do you see similar activities either being talked about or going ahead in other parts of the world? I mean, Canada, I know, Michael May is certainly thinking along those lines, but do you see many of these large-scale facilities really going ahead?
There's one opened up in France recently as a consortium of half a dozen firms, which when I looked at it is still probably half the size of what this place is going to be like.
So what are you thinking size-wise? Sorry, just give us a feel.
So if you add up all of the clean rooms in the UK across the 13 or 14 licensed sites now, it's about 1,000 metres of clean room.
Okay, so about 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, 1,000 square feet, yeah. So this facility initial footprint will be about 5,000 square metres.
Right, 50,000 square foot. Total locker rooms, total. Everything, yeah.
But if you go back to the benchmark clean space, manufacturing space, that'll be about 2,500 square metres initially. So that's more than double the combined capacity of the entire UK clean room system. So it's game changing, and it will be done in such a way that footprint can be doubled again by the end of this decade.
So it's something which you're going to try and do UK projects, but also expecting inward investment as well.
Yeah, I mean we've had we're talking to people now who want space, UK firms. Of course, some of the firms that we incubate will go there as well, but there are firms particularly from the US and Japan, who are interested in coming in, probably in a small way to start with, and then move on. So the early stage network is also important for firms who are coming in, who maybe only want a relatively small amount of space, and then the ability to bridge into that larger space.
So very much a seamless transition between the process development you're going to do within the Catapult as it stands, and then being able to take that down the road or wherever it's going to be to the UK large-scale manufacturing using the same equipment, and then basically running and being delivered at scale, basically. Yeah,
absolutely. And of course, it's all going to have to be done cost effectively because, you know, we want to be able to develop this operation so that people can afford it, and it keeps the cost of goods in an achievable range to work out for the health economics.
And cost of goods really are everything on this one. There is absolutely no doubt on that. Moving on from cost of goods, clearly is one area, but in terms of challenges, I mean, what do you see as the real challenges that are facing the UK as we move forward, and some of the solutions? How are we going to tackle those issues? And I know the House of Lords report has some recommendations. I know you're on the UK Regenerative Medicine Expert Group, and you're chairing the regulatory one. But in general, the challenges and solutions.
Well, I think the regulatory challenge is something I talked about earlier, and the recognition from the regulators that they have to reform their approach, and they are doing that. But that, of course, is only within the national context. They've still got to get through EMA, and we had at the Catapult our first scientific advice meeting with the EMA only yesterday, in fact. And of course, you know, this is still a challenging area. So, you know, don't expect an easy ride. It's still a lot of stuff to do there. So there's a regulatory piece, there's the health economics piece, and although NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, say they, you know, do have models which are appropriate.
And they've been very innovative, haven't they, on this? Yeah. I mean, you know, the guy leading this part, Nick Crabb, has been very innovative and very, very enthusiastic to try and resolve this, which I found very big sea change for NICE, actually. And I thought that's encouraged by that. What would be your feeling about it?
Yeah, that's right. I think everyone knows. You see, you know, the world's been through a stonking great recession. I mean, I must be just lucky because I've always managed to be in an industry that doesn't go through a recession when one hits. And frankly, it doesn't feel like a recession in cell therapy in the UK or regenerative medicine. And
we've been lucky with the TSB and government. I mean, they have really helped us through those patches. There's no doubt. Without them, we would not be in the same position.
So I think the other big challenge, and it's the same for everybody, is how do you operationalize the therapies? How do you get them into the clinic? And I think there's still at the point where there's, you know, a lot of arm waving going on about how they're going to, you know, deliver the therapies. And I think there are practical solutions. And I think that the the way in is through, you know, the larger centres, through the existing infrastructures like the tissue banks, because they're all regulated EU TCD, or through the blood banks, through the MHRA. Not very often through the pharmacy. And I think it's all about, you know, taking projects and then working out solutions that work around those projects. Because if you just try to do things on a theoretical basis, you know, when you try to apply a therapy through a route, it's probably not going to work. So something that works for delivering, you know, a therapy for the eye is not going to be the same as you know, a blood T-cell therapy.
But we still have a gap in the stakeholders. I mean, when I think of this meeting, the first meeting was, we did talk about the science. It was all about science. And then we've moved on into translation in general. And now, in the last few years, commercialization has really hit the fore. And now manufacturing is very much there. But the bit that I always think we've lacked is to get the routine clinicians on board. And I think they don't seem incentivized in the UK. If we had a show of hands of clinicians in the room, how many clinicians in the room? I'm the one. Is there anybody else? One at the back, one at there. And so that's an area which I think we need to somehow work. They're very busy, but we need to be able to educate them. And do you see that as a bottleneck, or is it something that Catapult is tackling? I mean, you've got a great CMO.
I don't see it as a problem because you're not trying to generalise this through a district general hospital.
Okay.
You're trying to put it through a specialist centre. And those specialist centres will generally have the enthusiastic clinicians that want to do this stuff. So,
but it is the enthusiastic rather than biotech, which is routine for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's nothing wrong with that. And what tends to happen is once a therapy gets a little traction, then it gets, you know, peer jealousy takes over, and they all want to take a piece of it. So entrepreneurial clinicians, you know, and I know a few, kind of make things happen. So once you get one going, you really get going much better. So in the UK now, there's about 3 or 4 centres that do eyelids.
And bone marrow, we're very successful at with our clinicians, highly enthusiastic. You're absolutely right on that. I agree.
Yeah. So I see it as a challenge, but the idea that you're going to leap from where we are to generalised products that are prescribed from a pharmacy, I think that's naive. It'll be specialist centres.
So similar maybe to the CERM Alpha clinics, that sort of idea.
Possibly, yeah. I think that when for the NHS as an exemplar here, you're more likely to be able to you know, carve out areas and deliver it from them. So if you look at
so very focused.
Very focused, yeah. So and I think it's important to try and get that right from the start, because I was involved in trying to rationalise bone marrow transplant, and boy, oh boy, I tell you, you know, somebody's only doing 10 patients a year, still doesn't want those 10 patients a year to have to travel 100 miles or 50 miles to go to a place which is doing 200. So I think there's an opportunity to get that concentration earlier on. Yeah.
Great. Well, we've got 1 more minute left. Keith, I'm going to ask a question. So, if we invite you back next year, which is highly likely, what do you think will, you know, looking at the crystal ball just 1 year ahead, so, you know, not huge, you know, changes expected, but what would you expect to be talking about this time next year? What do you think we would have done very well, and what do you think we could have done better over the next 12 months?
Well, I think if you look at the kind of metric on clinical trials, it's gone up 20%.
Yes, absolutely.
In a year.
Yeah,
I expect
good
that
point.
to increase again.
Fantastic.
I also expect to see at least a couple of investments happening in the space, either
big
from a
pharma
UK perspective, big pharma investments that will follow through and start to go from, if you like, you know, 10 or 20 million pound business units up to 100 million pound business units within pharma. So I expect to see more traction like that.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Keith. It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed our chat. Thank you. Thanks, Keith. Thank you. Well done. Great.